The people who laugh at you today are often the same people who will pretend they always believed in you tomorrow. Olivia Bennet heard the laughter before she even stepped through the ballroom doors. It drifted through the polished marble lobby of the Grand Crescent Hotel in Manhattan, mixing with the sound of live piano music and crystal glasses touching beneath warm golden lights. She paused for a moment outside the entrance, her hand resting lightly against the silver invitation she almost threw away 3 different times. The card felt heavier than paper should. Maybe because it carried memories. Maybe because it carried humiliation. Or maybe because it carried the name she spent years trying to forget. Ryan Carter. The man she once believed she would spend the rest of her life with. The man whose engagement celebration was taking place inside. Olivia inhaled slowly and straightened the sleeve of her navy blue dress. It was elegant but simple. She had purchased it months earlier for a charity event. Nothing about it competed with the luxury surrounding her tonight. Then again, she was not there to compete. She was there because ignoring the invitation would have made her look bitter. At least that was what she told herself. The ballroom sparkled like something from a movie. Massive chandeliers hung from the ceiling. White roses filled crystal arrangements on every table. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glowing Manhattan skyline. Waiters moved gracefully through the crowd carrying silver trays. Everywhere Olivia looked, she saw expensive suits, designer gowns, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Most faces were familiar. Former friends. Former business associates. People who once shared dinners with her and Ryan when neither of them had much money. Back then, everyone fit around folding tables inside tiny apartments. Now they gathered beneath chandeliers and spoke about investment portfolios. Funny how quickly success changed people. Olivia stepped farther into the room. Conversations continued around her. Some people recognized her immediately. Their reactions were subtle but impossible to miss. Brief whispers. Curious glances. Raised eyebrows. Nobody expected her to actually come. A woman standing near the champagne tower leaned toward her companion. Olivia could not hear every word, but she caught enough. I thought she moved away. I heard she works for a nonprofit now. Why would she come here? Olivia continued walking. Her expression never changed. Years earlier those comments would have hurt. Tonight they simply felt predictable. Then she saw Ryan. He stood near the center of the ballroom beneath a cluster of lights, surrounded by investors, executives, and friends. His tailored black tuxedo fit perfectly. Confidence radiated from him as naturally as breathing. Beside him stood his fiancée, Vanessa Monroe, daughter of a prominent real estate developer. Beautiful. Sophisticated. Wealthy. Everything people expected a successful man to choose. Ryan laughed at something one of his guests said. Then his eyes briefly found Olivia across the room. For 1 second, recognition appeared. For 1 second, time seemed to pause. Then he looked away. Just like that. No greeting. No acknowledgement. No smile. Nothing. The moment lasted less than 2 seconds, yet somehow felt longer than the entire evening. Olivia understood the message perfectly. To Ryan, she was history. A chapter already closed. She moved toward an empty table near the back of the ballroom. It offered a clear view of the city skyline and a safe distance from most conversations. She preferred it that way. A waiter offered sparkling water. She accepted gratefully. The cool glass felt steady in her hands. Around her, laughter continued. Music continued. Life continued. Yet a quiet loneliness settled inside her chest. Not because she missed Ryan. That pain belonged to another version of herself. The loneliness came from realizing how many people erased her the moment she stopped being useful to their story. Nearly everyone in this room remembered Ryan's rise. Very few remembered the years before it. The years when Olivia worked double shifts to help cover bills. The years she encouraged him after failed business pitches. The years she believed in his dreams before anyone else did. Success had rewritten history, and nobody seemed interested in correcting it. You look exactly like your father. The voice came from nowhere. Olivia turned immediately. An elderly gentleman stood beside her table. His silver hair was perfectly groomed. His dark suit looked expensive without appearing flashy. There was something unmistakably powerful about him, though she could not explain why. More surprising was the fact that she had never seen him before. "I am sorry?" Olivia asked politely. The man studied her face carefully. His expression softened. "Forgive me. It has been many years." Olivia frowned slightly. "Do we know each other?" Before he could answer, something unexpected happened. Across the ballroom, several guests suddenly noticed the elderly man standing beside Olivia. Conversations began slowing. Heads turned. Even waiters seemed momentarily distracted. The reaction confused her. Then she noticed Ryan looking in their direction. For the first time all evening, genuine surprise crossed his face. The elderly gentleman smiled gently. "No," he said. "But I knew someone who loved you very much." Olivia's heartbeat quickened. "Who?" The man extended his hand. "My name is Arthur Whitmore." The moment he spoke those words, the entire room seemed to change. Because Arthur Whitmore was not simply another guest. He was one of the wealthiest and most influential billionaires in America. And somehow, for reasons Olivia could not begin to understand, he was looking at her as though he had known her his entire life. The room remained strangely quiet even after Arthur Whitmore introduced himself. Olivia Bennet had seen his face countless times on magazine covers and financial news programs. Everyone in America knew who he was. Billionaire investor, philanthropist, founder of one of the largest private business empires in the country. Yet none of that explained why he was standing beside her at Ryan Carter's engagement celebration, speaking as though they shared a history. Around them, conversations gradually resumed, but the atmosphere felt different now. Curious glances continued drifting toward their table. Even people pretending not to watch were clearly paying attention. Arthur seemed completely unaware of the attention. Or perhaps completely uninterested by it. He remained focused only on Olivia. "I apologize if I startled you," he said gently. "You did," Olivia admitted. "You said you knew someone who loved me very much." Arthur nodded. "I did." His eyes softened. "Your father." Olivia froze. The words struck her harder than she expected. Her father had been gone for nearly 15 years. Most people at this event probably did not even know his name. Some had never met him. Yet Arthur spoke about him with familiarity. With affection. "You knew my father?" she asked quietly. Arthur smiled. "Very well." Olivia stared at him. Questions flooded her mind faster than she could organize them. Her father had been a high school teacher in a small Pennsylvania town. Honest. Kind. Hardworking. The type of man who measured wealth through family dinners and handwritten birthday cards. Nothing about his life suggested connections to billionaires. "I do not understand," she finally said. Arthur looked toward the Manhattan skyline glowing beyond the windows. Most important stories begin that way. Before Olivia could ask another question, Ryan suddenly appeared beside the table. His expression remained polite, though she immediately sensed curiosity beneath it. "Mr. Whitmore," Ryan said with a confident smile. "I hope you're enjoying the evening." Arthur turned calmly. "I am." Ryan glanced briefly toward Olivia. "I did not realize you two knew each other." Arthur's answer arrived without hesitation. "Neither did I. Until tonight." The response seemed simple enough. Yet something about it unsettled Ryan. Olivia noticed immediately. Ryan built his career on understanding people, on controlling conversations, on staying one step ahead. Tonight he looked uncertain. Arthur extended his hand. Ryan shook it quickly. "Congratulations on your engagement," Arthur said. "Thank you. I wish you and your future wife happiness." Ryan smiled. "That is very kind." Arthur nodded politely. Then, without warning, his attention returned entirely to Olivia. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Ryan stood there for another moment before excusing himself and returning to his guests. As soon as he left, Arthur smiled faintly. Success teaches people many things. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Such as, who they want to be seen with. The comment lingered between them. Arthur changed the subject before she could respond. "Tell me about your life." Olivia laughed softly. "I think you already know more than I do. Perhaps. Arthur leaned back slightly. Humor an old man. Over the next 30 minutes, Olivia found herself discussing things she rarely shared with strangers. Her nonprofit work, community programs, educational initiatives, volunteer projects. Arthur listened attentively. Not the way wealthy people often listened while waiting for their turn to speak. He genuinely listened, asked thoughtful questions, remembered details. The experience felt strangely comforting. Eventually, Arthur asked, "Are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. Most people asked about careers, salaries, accomplishments. Very few asked that. Olivia considered the answer carefully. Some days more than others. Arthur smiled knowingly. That is usually the honest answer. Across the ballroom, guests continued celebrating. Music drifted through the air. Laughter echoed beneath crystal chandeliers. Yet Olivia barely noticed any of it anymore. Her attention remained fixed on the mystery sitting across from her. How did he know her father? Why did he seem unsurprised by her presence? Why did he look at her with an expression that felt almost familiar? As though he had been searching for something and finally found it. Near the end of the evening, Arthur reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a small folded piece of paper. The edges appeared worn with age. Carefully handled. Carefully preserved. "I have carried this for many years," he said. Olivia watched as he placed it on the table between them. "What is it?" Arthur smiled. "A reminder." "Of what?" His gaze met hers. "A promise." Olivia looked down at the folded paper but made no move to open it. Something about the moment felt unexpectedly important. "My father wrote that?" she asked. Arthur nodded slowly. "A long time ago." Before she could ask more, Arthur carefully returned the paper to his pocket. "Not tonight." Olivia blinked in surprise. "Not tonight." Some answers arrive too early. He stood from the table. And some arrive exactly when they are supposed to. The ballroom lights reflected softly across the windows behind him. For a moment, Arthur seemed less like one of the richest men in America and more like someone carrying a secret too significant to reveal carelessly. "Will I see you again?" Olivia asked before she could stop herself. Arthur smiled warmly. "Yes." The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. Then he added something that made her heart skip. "After all, Olivia Grace Bennett, we have quite a lot to talk about." She stared at him in complete shock. Almost nobody knew her full childhood name. Her father used it. Her mother used it. A handful of relatives used it. That was all. Arthur simply nodded as though her reaction confirmed something he already suspected. Then he walked away into the crowd. Olivia remained seated beneath the chandeliers, watching him disappear among Manhattan's most powerful people. Across the ballroom, Ryan watched the entire exchange unfold. And for the first time that evening, it was not Olivia who felt forgotten. It was Ryan who suddenly realized there was a story unfolding around his former wife that nobody else seemed to understand. Some mysteries refuse to leave your mind once they arrive. 3 days after Ryan Carter's engagement celebration, Olivia Bennett still could not stop thinking about Arthur Whitmore. She tried. She buried herself in work at the nonprofit foundation where she managed educational outreach programs. She attended meetings, reviewed budgets, coordinated volunteer schedules. Yet every quiet moment brought her back to the same questions. How did Arthur know her father? Why did he know her childhood name? And what was hidden inside that folded piece of paper he carried like a treasure? Outside her office window, late autumn rain drifted across downtown Philadelphia. Cars moved slowly through wet streets. The city looked gray and distant beneath heavy clouds. Olivia sat at her desk reviewing grant applications when her phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Normally, she ignored calls from numbers she did not recognize. Something made her answer anyway. "Hello." A calm voice responded immediately. "Good afternoon, Olivia Grace Bennett." She nearly dropped the phone. "Arthur?" Soft laughter traveled through the line. "I was hoping you would recognize me." Olivia leaned back in her chair. "How did you get this number?" "That is the question you chose?" "I have many questions." "Excellent." His tone sounded pleased. "I dislike boring conversations." Despite herself, Olivia smiled. What do you want? Lunch. The answer came instantly. Lunch. Tomorrow. Olivia glanced at her calendar. Most people usually explain why. Most people are predictable. Another pause followed. Will you come? Curiosity had already won. Where? Arthur named a small restaurant overlooking the Delaware River. Not a luxury establishment. Not a private club. Just a quiet local restaurant known for good food and beautiful waterfront views. The choice surprised her. Billionaires were supposed to choose penthouses and private dining rooms. Arthur apparently followed different rules. The next afternoon, Olivia arrived 10 minutes early. The restaurant overlooked the river through large glass windows. Sailboats drifted across calm water. The atmosphere felt warm and comfortable. Arthur was already seated at a corner table. A leather-bound book rested beside his coffee cup. He stood as she approached. You came. Olivia smiled. You sounded confident that I would. I was. After ordering lunch, they spent nearly an hour discussing ordinary things. Books, travel, community projects, family traditions. Arthur asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully to every answer. The conversation felt strangely effortless. Yet beneath it all lingered the mystery neither had addressed directly. Finally, Olivia placed her fork down. All right. Arthur smiled knowingly. There it is. There what is? The question you have been carrying since Manhattan. Olivia folded her arms. You knew my father. Arthur nodded. Yes. How? For the first time all afternoon, his expression grew serious. He looked toward the river beyond the windows before answering. 40 years ago, I was not the man people know today. Olivia remained silent. I had ambition. Ideas. Dreams. A faint smile touched his face. Unfortunately, I also had very little money. She listened carefully. Your father and I met during one of the most difficult periods of my life. Arthur's gaze remained fixed on the water. I was traveling through Pennsylvania. My car broke down outside a small town. Olivia's heart began beating faster. Her father spent his entire life in a small Pennsylvania town. Arthur continued. I had nowhere to stay. No connections. No real plan. His smile returned softly. Your father invited a stranger into his home. Olivia stared at him. What? He gave me dinner. Arthur laughed quietly. Your mother insisted I take leftovers when I left. Memories flickered across Olivia's mind. Childhood dinners. Her father's kindness toward everyone. The way he never allowed people to leave hungry. Arthur reached inside his jacket and removed a worn photograph. He carefully slid it across the table. Olivia picked it up. Her breath caught instantly. The photograph showed her father standing beside a much younger Arthur Whitmore. Both men smiled at the camera. Behind them stood an old pickup truck she immediately recognized. That cannot be real, she whispered. It is. Arthur's voice softened. Your father helped me when he had every reason not to. Olivia looked at the photograph again. He never mentioned you. Arthur nodded slowly. Because he never helped people for recognition. Silence settled between them. The river drifted quietly beyond the windows. Finally, Arthur reached into his pocket and removed the folded paper she remembered from the gala. This time he placed it directly in front of her. I think you're ready. Olivia hesitated before carefully unfolding it. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her father's. Tears immediately filled her eyes. She recognized every curve of every letter. Arthur remained silent while she read. The message was brief. A personal letter written decades earlier. Most of it spoke about friendship, gratitude, and faith in the future. Then Olivia reached the final paragraph. Her eyes widened. She read it twice to make certain she understood correctly. Then she looked up at Arthur. What does this mean? Arthur's expression carried both warmth and sadness. It means your father asked me for one promise. Olivia lowered her gaze back to the letter. And you kept it? Arthur nodded. For 40 years. Her pulse quickened. What promise? Arthur leaned back slowly. Outside, rain began falling against the river once more. The promise, he said quietly, was about you. The promise was about you. Arthur Whitmore's words remained suspended between them like a bell that continued ringing long after the sound should have faded. Rain tapped softly against the restaurant windows overlooking the Delaware River. Olivia Bennet lowered her eyes to the letter once again. Her father's handwriting blurred slightly as emotion gathered behind her eyes. For several seconds, she could not speak. "I do not understand," she finally whispered. Arthur nodded gently. "That is reasonable." He folded his hands on the table. "Your father and I stayed in contact for many years after we met." Olivia looked up. "He never mentioned that." "Because he never wanted anything from me." Arthur smiled sadly. "That was one of the things I admired most about him." The restaurant remained quiet around them. Afternoon sunlight occasionally broke through the clouds, casting silver reflections across the river. Arthur leaned back slightly. "As my business career grew, I offered him opportunities more than once." Olivia listened carefully. "Investments, partnerships, financial assistance." Arthur shook his head with quiet admiration. He declined every single offer. That sounded exactly like her father. "Why?" she asked. Arthur laughed softly. "He told me that wealth was useful, but character was essential." The answer felt so familiar that Olivia could almost hear her father's voice speaking it. Arthur continued. "Your father believed that if he raised you with integrity, determination, and compassion, you would build your own future." Olivia lowered her gaze. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. Long drives through Pennsylvania back roads. Saturday mornings helping neighbors repair fences. Her father stopping conversations to greet strangers by name. Small lessons she barely appreciated at the time. "Then why the promise?" she asked. Arthur's expression softened further. "Because life does not always follow our plans." Silence settled between them. Arthur looked toward the folded letter. "Several months before his passing, your father wrote that note." Olivia felt her chest tighten. "He knew." Arthur nodded. He understood his health was declining. The realization hurt even after all these years. Arthur continued carefully. "He never asked me to give you money." Olivia blinked. "He did not." "No," Arthur smiled. "In fact, he specifically told me not to." That answer surprised her. "Then what did he ask?" Arthur's eyes met hers directly. "He asked me to watch." Olivia frowned. "Watch? Watch the kind of person you became." The words hung quietly between them. "Your father believed that one day you would face difficult seasons. He believed life would test you." Arthur paused. "He wanted someone he trusted to make certain those seasons never convinced you that your worth depended on what other people thought of you." Olivia sat motionless. Arthur reached into his jacket and removed a small notebook. The leather cover appeared worn from years of use. He opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten notes stretching back decades. "I have kept records of many things," he explained. "Business ideas, investments, important conversations." He turned several pages. "And your father." Olivia watched as he stopped at an entry dated nearly 20 years earlier. Arthur read aloud. "If anything happens to me, promise me one thing. If my daughter ever forgets who she is, remind her." Arthur closed the notebook slowly. Neither spoke for several moments. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Sunlight now shimmered across the river. Olivia felt overwhelmed by emotions she could barely organize. Grief, gratitude, confusion, hope. Arthur observed her quietly. "You spent years believing you lost everything when your marriage ended." Olivia looked away. "Sometimes it felt that way." "I know." "How?" Arthur smiled gently. "Because I paid attention." The answer startled her. "You have been watching me?" "Not in the way you think." Arthur chuckled softly. "I simply kept my promise." He explained that over the years he occasionally asked mutual contacts about her life. Not constantly. Not intrusively. Just enough to know whether she was safe. Whether she was moving forward. Whether she remained true to herself. "And what did you learn?" Olivia asked. Arthur answered without hesitation. "That your father was right." Emotion tightened her throat again. Arthur continued. "You faced disappointment." "Yes." "Heartbreak." "Yes." "Loneliness." Olivia nodded. Arthur smiled warmly. Yet every report ended the same way. She looked at him curiously. How? Olivia helped someone. A faint laugh escaped her despite everything. Arthur laughed too. Community programs. Volunteer work. Mentorship. Educational outreach. He shook his head with admiration. You kept choosing service even when life gave you reasons not to. For the first time, Olivia began understanding why Arthur had appeared at Ryan's engagement celebration. The encounter had not been coincidence. It had been the conclusion of a promise decades in the making. So what happens now? She asked. Arthur looked toward the river one final time before answering. Now, his smile returned. Now I introduce you to a world your father always believed you belonged in. Olivia frowned slightly. What does that mean? Arthur stood and placed enough cash on the table to cover lunch despite her protests. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her a cream-colored envelope embossed with the Whitmore Foundation seal. Open it tomorrow morning. Olivia accepted it carefully. What is it? Arthur's eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. An invitation. To what? He adjusted his jacket. The beginning of the next chapter. Before she could ask another question, he started walking toward the restaurant exit. Halfway to the door, he stopped and glanced back. Your father believed character opens doors that money never can. Then he smiled. Tomorrow, Olivia, one of those doors opens for you. The next morning, Olivia Bennett opened the cream-colored envelope exactly as Arthur Whitmore instructed. Sunlight streamed through the windows of her apartment in Philadelphia, illuminating the kitchen table where she sat with a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. She had barely slept. Questions occupied every corner of her mind. The envelope contained a single invitation printed on thick ivory paper. The wording was simple. The Whitmore Foundation Leadership Fellowship. Private orientation session. Saturday. 10 o'clock. New York City. Olivia read the invitation twice. Then a third time. There was no explanation. No additional information. Only a location and Arthur's signature at the bottom. 3 days later, she arrived at the address listed on the invitation. The building overlooked Central Park. Modern glass walls reflected the skyline. Security personnel greeted her by name before escorting her upstairs. Every detail felt surreal. Olivia expected a conference room filled with applicants. Instead, she found a private meeting room overlooking Manhattan. Arthur was waiting beside the windows. Good, he said with a smile. You came. Olivia laughed softly. You keep saying that as though I might not. Arthur motioned toward a chair. Many people spend their lives avoiding opportunities because they are afraid of discovering what they are capable of. Olivia sat down. And what exactly is this opportunity? Arthur handed her a folder. Inside were descriptions of community initiatives, business leadership programs, educational partnerships, and philanthropic projects operating across the country. The Whitmore Foundation manages hundreds of programs, Arthur explained. Most focus on helping communities create sustainable opportunities. Olivia flipped through the pages. The scale of the work amazed her. Millions of dollars invested in education, workforce development, and local entrepreneurship. This is incredible, she said honestly. Arthur nodded. I think so too. Then his expression shifted slightly. And I think you can help. Over the following weeks, Olivia found herself entering a world she never imagined. Arthur introduced her to nonprofit leaders, educators, business executives, and community organizers. She attended strategy meetings, visited foundation projects, participated in leadership workshops. At first, she felt intimidated. Many people around her possessed prestigious degrees and impressive titles. Yet something unexpected happened. The more she contributed, the more people listened. Her years working directly with families and communities gave her a perspective others often lacked. She understood challenges from the ground level. She understood people. Arthur noticed it immediately. One afternoon after a meeting in Chicago, he joined her in a quiet conference room overlooking Lake Michigan. Do you know why everyone keeps asking for your opinion? He asked. Olivia smiled. Because they're being polite? Arthur laughed. No, he pointed toward the conference table. Because you solve problems without needing recognition. The compliment caught her off guard. I am still learning. Good. Arthur nodded approvingly. The moment someone believes they have learned everything is usually the moment they stop growing. Months passed. For the first time in years, Olivia felt something she had not experienced since before her divorce. Momentum. Purpose. Confidence. Not the fragile confidence that depended on praise or approval. The quiet kind built through meaningful work. Meanwhile, Arthur became a regular presence in her life. Sometimes they discussed foundation projects. Other times they simply shared dinner and talked about books, history, or family memories. The relationship never felt transactional. It felt personal, genuine, almost familial. That realization became impossible to ignore during the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala held the following spring. The event brought together major donors, executives, board members, and public figures from across the country. Olivia attended expecting another evening focused on fundraising and community programs. Instead, she found herself seated at Arthur's table, directly beside him. The placement immediately attracted attention. Throughout the evening, she noticed curious glances from board members and senior executives. Several appeared confused. Others seemed concerned. One man eventually approached Arthur during dinner. "Arthur," he said politely, "there are several board members asking about the fellowship participant." Arthur smiled. "Olivia?" "Yes." The man nodded. "People are wondering why she is involved in strategic meetings." Arthur's expression remained calm. "Because she belongs there." The answer ended the conversation immediately. Yet it only increased the curiosity spreading throughout the room. Later that evening, while guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, Olivia stepped onto an outdoor terrace overlooking the city lights. Cool spring air drifted through the darkness. The skyline glowed against the night sky. She heard footsteps approaching behind her. Arthur joined her near the railing. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Olivia looked toward him. "People are asking questions." Arthur smiled knowingly. "Yes." "About me?" "Yes." She folded her arms lightly. "Why?" Arthur studied the skyline before answering. "Because people become uncomfortable when they cannot explain something." Olivia frowned. "What can they not explain?" Arthur turned toward her. For the first time that evening, a trace of sadness appeared in his eyes. "Why someone like me would care so much about someone like you." The words lingered between them. Olivia felt her pulse quicken. Arthur looked away toward the city lights. "There are truths I have delayed sharing." She stared at him. "What truths?" Arthur remained silent for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and removed a sealed envelope. It looked older than the one she received months earlier. Much older. Carefully preserved through time. He placed it in her hands. "Your father gave me this 40 years ago." Olivia looked down at the envelope. Her name appeared on the front in her father's handwriting. Arthur's voice softened. "I think the time has finally come for you to know why." Olivia Bennet stared at the envelope for nearly a minute before opening it. The city skyline glittered beyond the terrace of the Whitmore Foundation Gala, but she barely noticed. Her father's handwriting covered the front of the envelope. Seeing it again after so many years felt almost unreal. Carefully, she broke the seal. Inside rested several folded pages. The paper had yellowed with age. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the first sheet. Arthur Whitmore remained beside her but said nothing. This moment belonged entirely to her. Olivia began reading. The letter was written years before her father's passing. His words sounded exactly like the voice she remembered. Warm, honest, thoughtful. He wrote about family, about kindness, about the importance of choosing character when life offered easier alternatives. Tears slowly gathered in Olivia's eyes. Then she reached the final pages. Everything changed. Her father described the friendship he shared with Arthur. He described the years after Arthur's business success began transforming into something extraordinary. Most importantly, he described a conversation that occurred shortly before Olivia was born. According to the letter, Arthur had once insisted he owed a debt he could never fully repay. Olivia's father disagreed. Friendship was not a transaction. Kindness was not an investment. Yet Arthur refused to let the matter rest. Eventually, the two men reached an agreement. If Arthur ever built the future he dreamed of, he would help create opportunities for the people who mattered most to his friend. Not through gifts, not through special treatment, through guidance and opportunity. Olivia read the final paragraph twice, then a third time. Her father had written one sentence that refused to leave her mind. If my daughter ever earns your respect, treat her as family. She lowered the letter slowly. The city lights blurred through tears she had not realized were falling. Arthur remained silent until she finished. Now you understand, he said softly. Olivia looked toward him. You have been honoring his wish this entire time. Arthur nodded. Not because of obligation. He smiled gently. Because he was right about you. For several moments neither spoke. Music drifted from the ballroom behind them. Guests laughed. Glasses clinked. Yet the world beyond the terrace felt strangely distant. Olivia carefully folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. I do not know what to say. Arthur's eyes softened. You do not need to say anything. Over the following year, Olivia's involvement with the Whitmore Foundation expanded dramatically. She helped launch educational programs, led community initiatives, consulted on projects across multiple states. Every challenge pushed her further beyond her comfort zone. Every success revealed strengths she never fully recognized in herself. More importantly, she discovered something unexpected. She enjoyed leadership. Not because of authority, because of impact. She loved helping organizations solve problems. She loved creating opportunities for others. Arthur watched her growth with quiet pride. Yet not everyone shared his enthusiasm. Inside Whitmore Capital and the Foundation's executive network, questions continued spreading. Why was Olivia receiving access normally reserved for senior leadership? Why did Arthur trust her judgment so completely? Why did he speak about her with such obvious admiration? Rumors multiplied. Some people assumed she would eventually receive a prominent position. Others suspected Arthur simply saw potential. Nobody knew the truth. Then something changed. During a board retreat in Colorado, Olivia noticed Arthur becoming tired more often. Small things at first. Longer pauses during presentations. Missed meals. Moments of fatigue he tried unsuccessfully to hide. One evening after a leadership session ended, she found him sitting alone outside the lodge overlooking the mountains. Snow-covered distant peaks beneath a brilliant sunset. Arthur smiled when he saw her approaching. Beautiful view. Olivia sat beside him. You should be resting. Arthur laughed softly. That sounds familiar. Because it is true. For a moment neither spoke. The mountains stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Finally Arthur sighed. Doctors enjoy giving advice almost as much as board members. Olivia turned toward him. Arthur. His expression became serious. There are things I need to finish. Her stomach tightened immediately. What kind of things? Arthur stared at the mountains. The kind people postpone because they assume there will always be more time. The answer unsettled her. Over the months that followed, his health continued declining. Publicly, little changed. Arthur remained active. Meetings continued. Projects advanced. Yet those closest to him recognized the truth. Time had become precious. One autumn afternoon, Arthur invited Olivia to his private office overlooking Central Park. The office walls displayed decades of photographs, awards, and memories. Family portraits stood beside images of business milestones. Olivia immediately sensed something different. Arthur appeared thoughtful, reflective. He motioned toward a chair. There is something important we need to discuss. Olivia sat down quietly. Arthur opened a drawer and removed a thick folder secured with a ribbon. He rested his hand on it for several seconds before speaking. Most people believe wealth should pass through bloodlines. Olivia listened carefully. Do you agree? Arthur smiled faintly. I believe character matters more. The answer sent a chill through her. Arthur continued. Your father understood that long before I did. He looked directly into her eyes. And soon, many people are going to learn the difference. Olivia glanced toward the folder resting on his desk. Her pulse quickened. Something significant was coming. Something far larger than foundation programs, leadership fellowships, or old promises. Arthur followed her gaze and nodded slowly. When the time arrives, he said quietly, the entire world will understand why your father trusted me with that promise. Winter arrived quietly in New York. Snow dusted rooftops across Manhattan and transformed Central Park into a landscape of white and silver. Yet inside Whitmore Capital headquarters, the atmosphere felt heavy. Olivia Bennet noticed it immediately. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Board members exchanged careful glances. Executives spoke in lower voices than usual. Everyone sensed the same reality, even if nobody wanted to say it aloud. Arthur Whitmore's health was failing. Publicly, official statements remained optimistic. Privately, those closest to him understood the truth. The man who spent decades building one of America's largest business empires was running out of time. Olivia continued working exactly as Arthur taught her. She focused on projects, communities, educational initiatives, leadership programs. Yet every accomplishment carried an undercurrent of sadness. She could see the change in him. Meetings became shorter. Travel became less frequent. The energy that once seemed limitless now appeared carefully rationed. One snowy afternoon, Arthur invited her to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The residence reflected elegance without excess. Family photographs lined bookshelves. Framed letters and personal mementos occupied places of honor rather than expensive artwork. Olivia had visited before, but tonight felt different. A fire burned quietly in the living room. Soft jazz music played in the background. Arthur sat beside the window watching snow fall over the city. "Beautiful, is it not?" he asked as she entered. Olivia smiled gently. "It is." Arthur motioned toward the chair beside him. "Sit with me." For a while neither spoke. Snowflakes drifted beyond the glass while Manhattan lights flickered beneath the evening sky. Finally, Arthur broke the silence. "Do you know what surprises me most about success?" Olivia glanced toward him. "What?" Arthur smiled faintly. "How little it matters compared to the people you share it with." The answer felt unusually personal. Olivia listened quietly. Arthur's gaze remained fixed on the city below. "When I was young, I believed wealth would solve everything." He laughed softly. "Then I spent a lifetime learning otherwise." Another silence followed. Then Arthur turned toward her. "You have become exactly the person your father hoped you would become." Emotion tightened her throat. Even after all these years, hearing those words carried enormous weight. "I still have a lot to learn." Arthur nodded approvingly. "Good answer." Then his expression grew serious. "There is something important I need you to understand." Olivia immediately sensed the significance of the moment. Arthur reached toward a nearby table where a thick leather folder rested. The same folder she noticed months earlier. The same folder that seemed to carry enormous importance. He placed it carefully between them. For years, people have assumed this empire would eventually belong to blood relatives. Olivia looked down at the folder. "And will it?" Arthur smiled sadly. "Blood creates connections. Character creates trust." The answer sent a chill through her. Before she could respond, Arthur continued. "Many people inherit wealth. Very few inherit responsibility." His hand rested gently on the folder. "What matters is not who receives something. What matters is what they do with it." The conversation remained unfinished when Arthur's assistant entered the room carrying tea. Yet Olivia sensed she had just heard the beginning of something life-changing. Over the next several weeks, Arthur withdrew further from public appearances. News organizations speculated about succession plans. Financial analysts debated potential leadership changes. Board members held private meetings behind closed doors. Rumors spread throughout business circles. Some expected distant relatives to inherit substantial ownership. Others believed executive leadership would divide responsibilities among multiple successors. Nobody seemed certain. Then one cold January morning, headlines appeared across every major news network in America. Arthur Whitmore had passed away peacefully during the night. The announcement sent shockwaves through financial markets, philanthropic organizations, and corporate boardrooms nationwide. Tributes poured in immediately. Political leaders released statements. Business executives shared memories. Communities across the country honored programs Arthur funded over the decades. Olivia sat alone in her apartment staring at the television screen. Grief settled heavily over the room. Not because America had lost a billionaire. Because she had lost a friend. A mentor. The last living connection to her father. The following week, hundreds gathered inside a historic Manhattan cathedral to celebrate Arthur's life. Snow lined the sidewalks outside. Inside, the atmosphere felt solemn yet grateful. Stories filled the service. Stories about generosity, leadership, opportunity. Lives changed through quiet acts of kindness. Olivia sat near the front among foundation leaders and longtime friends. Across the room, she noticed executives from Whitmore Capital, influential investors, board members. Even Ryan Carter appeared among the attendees. Arthur's influence had touched nearly every corner of American business. Following the service, a private gathering was scheduled at Whitmore Capital headquarters. Senior leadership, legal representatives, family members, and selected guests received invitations. Olivia found her name on the list. The invitation surprised her, though perhaps it should not have. Arthur always seemed to anticipate moments before they arrived. That afternoon, snow continued falling as black cars arrived outside the headquarters building. Guests entered quietly. Lawyers organized documents. Executives filled conference rooms. Conversations remained respectful but cautious. Everyone knew why they were there. Arthur's final wishes would soon be revealed. Olivia took her seat near the back of a large boardroom overlooking the city. Rows of chairs filled quickly. Family members sat together. Senior executives occupied the front. Ryan sat several rows ahead. The lead attorney eventually stepped forward carrying a sealed document case. The room became completely silent. Snow drifted beyond the windows. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the attorney opened the case, adjusted his glasses, and began reading the first lines of Arthur Whitmore's final will. And within minutes, every assumption in the room would be shattered forever. The boardroom remained silent as the attorney continued reading Arthur Whitmore's final will. Snow drifted beyond the massive windows overlooking Manhattan. Inside, dozens of people listened carefully. Family members, executives, investors, longtime advisors. Every person in the room arrived with assumptions. Every person believed they understood how this story would end. Olivia Bennet sat quietly near the back, her hands folded in her lap. Grief still weighed heavily on her heart. She was not thinking about inheritance. She was thinking about Arthur, the mentor who believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. The friend who kept a promise made decades earlier. Across the room, Ryan Carter listened with professional interest. Like many others, he assumed ownership of the Whitmore empire would be divided among relatives, trusts, and executive leadership structures. The details mattered to the business community. Nobody expected surprises. Then the attorney reached a section that changed everything. In accordance with Arthur Whitmore's final instructions, additional provisions shall now be disclosed. Several executives shifted in their seats. The attorney opened a second folder. Mr. Whitmore left extensive letters explaining the reasoning behind his decisions. A low murmur passed through the room before fading again. The attorney adjusted his glasses and continued reading. Arthur's words filled the boardroom. He spoke about responsibility, character, leadership, trust. He described the dangers of placing wealth in the hands of people who valued possession more than purpose. He explained that true stewardship required empathy, discipline, and integrity. Many people nodded respectfully. The principles sounded exactly like Arthur. Then the attorney read the next paragraph. The room changed instantly. The future of my personal holdings, controlling interests, and majority ownership positions shall transfer to the individual I believe best represents the values upon which everything was built. Silence settled across the room. Several relatives exchanged confused glances. Executives leaned forward. The attorney continued. This decision was not based upon bloodline, status, or expectation. It was based upon character. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The attorney opened the final document and read a single name. Olivia Grace Bennet. For several seconds, absolute silence filled the room. No one seemed capable of processing what they had just heard. Olivia stared forward without blinking. Surely she misunderstood. Surely there had been a mistake. Yet the attorney calmly repeated her name. Gasps echoed throughout the boardroom. Several family members looked stunned. Others appeared completely speechless. Board members exchanged bewildered expressions. Across the room, Ryan Carter froze. His eyes immediately found Olivia. The same woman who sat alone at his engagement celebration years earlier now occupied the center of a revelation nobody saw coming. The attorney continued reading. Arthur had left detailed explanations supporting every decision. Letters, personal statements, legal instructions prepared over many years. Every document reinforced the same conclusion. Arthur trusted Olivia more than anyone else. Not because of family obligation. Not because of sentiment. Because of who she consistently chose to become. As the meeting proceeded, legal advisors explained the scope of Arthur's estate. Ownership interests, investments, philanthropic organizations, real estate holdings, business assets. The numbers sounded almost impossible to comprehend. Financial reporters would later describe the transfer as one of the most unexpected inheritance decisions in modern business history. Olivia barely heard any of it. Her thoughts remained fixed on Arthur's words. Character creates trust. Suddenly she understood what he meant. He had never been preparing her for a position. He had been preparing her for responsibility. The meeting eventually ended. Yet the shock continued spreading through the building. Hallways filled with whispered conversations. Phones rang constantly. News outlets began requesting statements before attendees even left the property. By evening, the story dominated financial media across the country. Every major network covered the announcement. Analysts debated the implications. Journalists investigated Olivia's background. Social media exploded with speculation. For the first time in her life, Olivia became a public figure. She hated it immediately. The attention felt overwhelming. Unnatural. Yet Arthur anticipated that too. Among the documents delivered to her was a personal letter written shortly before his passing. She read it alone inside her apartment that evening. The letter contained no discussion of wealth, no business instructions, no strategic advice. Instead, Arthur wrote about purpose. He reminded her that public attention fades. Headlines disappear. Markets fluctuate. Character remains. The final paragraph brought tears to her eyes. Your father believed you would become someone extraordinary. I simply had the privilege of watching him be right. Weeks passed. The initial frenzy slowly settled. Olivia assumed leadership responsibilities exactly as Arthur intended. She met with executives, reviewed foundation programs, strengthened community initiatives. Most importantly, she preserved the mission Arthur spent his life building. People expected dramatic changes. There were none. Her leadership reflected the same values Arthur taught her. Thoughtful decisions, long-term thinking, genuine concern for people. The respect she earned grew quickly. Then spring arrived. Nearly a year after Arthur's passing, an invitation appeared for one of the country's most prestigious business galas. Industry leaders from around the world would attend. Media coverage would be extensive. Investors, executives, and public figures would fill the ballroom. Olivia initially considered declining. Public events still made her uncomfortable. Yet one detail changed her mind. Ryan Carter's company would also be attending. The realization barely affected her emotionally. The past no longer carried the power it once held. Still, life seemed to enjoy creating unusual circles. On the evening of the gala, black cars lined the entrance of a luxury Manhattan hotel. Cameras flashed. Reporters gathered outside. Inside, hundreds of influential guests filled a magnificent ballroom illuminated by crystal chandeliers. Ryan arrived expecting another successful evening among peers and industry leaders. Then the main doors opened. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. The atmosphere shifted almost instantly. Because the woman entering the ballroom was no longer the overlooked ex-wife everyone once ignored. She had become something nobody ever imagined. The ballroom fell quiet in a way that no amount of money could purchase. Conversation slowed. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the musicians seemed to lower their volume as Olivia Bennet stepped through the grand entrance beneath the crystal chandeliers. She wore a simple ivory evening gown accented with understated elegance. Nothing about her appearance demanded attention. Yet, somehow every eye in the room followed her. Not because of what she wore, because everyone knew who she was. Over the past year, her story had become impossible to ignore. Newspapers called her the unexpected heiress. Business magazines analyzed her leadership style. Philanthropic organizations praised the expansion of educational and community programs under her guidance. The woman once overlooked at the edge of important rooms now walked confidently through the center of them. Olivia noticed the attention but did not seek it. She greeted people politely, shook hands, smiled warmly, exactly as Arthur Whitmore had taught her. Across the ballroom, Ryan Carter watched her approach. Time had changed many things since the engagement celebration years earlier. His career remained successful. His company continued growing. Yet tonight, for reasons he could not fully explain, he felt unexpectedly small. Perhaps because he remembered the woman sitting alone near the back of a ballroom while everyone ignored her. Perhaps because he remembered how easily he looked away. Olivia eventually reached the reception area where guests gathered before dinner. Several executives welcomed her immediately. Foundation leaders approached with smiles. Investors introduced themselves. The respect surrounding her felt genuine, earned, built slowly through years of integrity and service. Ryan stood nearby observing everything. The contrast became impossible to ignore. Years earlier, he measured success through status, influence, and visibility. Olivia seemed to measure success through impact. Somehow her definition had proven stronger. Later in the evening, guests moved into the main ballroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Manhattan skyline shimmering against the night sky. Hundreds of candles illuminated the room with warm golden light. During dinner, speakers reflected on leadership, innovation, and social responsibility. Several individuals referenced Arthur Whitmore's legacy. More than once, they mentioned Olivia's role in continuing his vision. Each mention earned sincere applause. Olivia accepted the recognition with humility. She never appeared comfortable being the center of attention. Ryan noticed that too. Near the end of the event, guests gathered for a final presentation honoring philanthropic achievements from the past year. The Master of Ceremonies invited Olivia to the stage. Applause filled the room as she approached the podium. She paused briefly beneath the lights and looked across the audience. Hundreds of faces stared back. Powerful people. Influential people. Successful people. Yet Olivia's expression remained calm. Many years ago, she began, "Someone taught me that character matters most when nobody is watching." The room grew quieter. "That lesson changed my life." She spoke about opportunity, community, responsibility. She spoke about the teachers, volunteers, mentors, and families who strengthened neighborhoods across the country. Not once did she discuss wealth. Not once did she discuss inheritance. The speech lasted less than 10 minutes. Yet by the end, many people sat completely still. Because authenticity carries a power that performance never can. As applause filled the ballroom, Olivia stepped away from the podium. For a brief moment, her eyes met Ryan's across the room. No anger existed there. No bitterness. No desire for revenge. Only peace. The realization struck him harder than any public humiliation ever could. She had moved beyond the chapter that once defined both of them. After the presentation ended, guests gradually returned to conversations and networking. Ryan eventually found himself standing near one of the ballroom windows overlooking the city. He heard footsteps approaching. Turning slightly, he saw Olivia. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ryan smiled awkwardly. "Congratulations." Olivia smiled politely. "Thank you." He looked toward the skyline. "You have accomplished incredible things. Many people helped along the way." Ryan laughed softly. "You always answered that way." Olivia smiled. "Probably." Another silence followed. Then Ryan spoke honestly. I was wrong about a lot of things. Olivia studied the city lights beyond the glass. Most people are at some point. The answer carried no judgment. Only truth. Ryan nodded slowly. I spent years chasing the wrong definition of success. Olivia looked toward him. Then you still have time to choose a better one. The simplicity of the response left him speechless. She was not interested in winning an old argument. She was not interested in proving anyone wrong. She had already outgrown the need for either. Moments later, another guest approached Olivia regarding a foundation initiative. She excused herself politely and joined the conversation. Ryan remained beside the window watching her disappear into the crowd. Not as someone who lost her. Not as someone who wished for another chance. Simply as someone finally understanding her value. Hours later, the gala concluded. Guests departed into the Manhattan night. Olivia stepped outside and paused briefly beneath the glow of the city skyline. Cold air carried the sounds of distant traffic and winter wind. For a moment she thought about her father. About Arthur. About every difficult season that once felt impossible to survive. Neither man had given her success. They had given her something far more valuable. They reminded her who she was. Olivia smiled softly and looked toward the stars hidden beyond the city lights. The journey had never been about proving people wrong. It had never been about wealth, status, or recognition. It had been about becoming the person she was always capable of becoming. And in the end, she did not win back a husband. She did not defeat an enemy. She did something far more important. She found herself.